In the heart of a deadly snowstorm, an aging German shepherd sensed something no one else could. His instincts pulled his master, a reclusive veteran, deep into the forest, where a young couple lay trapped in their wrecked car, the wife fighting for her life, and the unborn child she carried. Step by step, through blinding wind and crushing drifts, the old canine threw every last ounce of strength into the rescue, refusing to surrender. What happened on that night would change not only their lives, but the way an entire town remembered the man and his loyal dog. What came next? The storm had been building since dusk. By the time the last streaks of twilight bled away behind the mountains, the valley was already a vast white emptiness, a place where even the trees looked afraid to move. Snow fell in sheets, restless and relentless, as though the sky had run out of patience and decided to bury everything in its reach. The wind screamed between the pines, shaking loose drifts that exploded like pale smoke. Inside a cabin perched on the ridge, the world looked different. Shadows gathered in the corners, pressed back by the glow of a wood stove. The fire cracked and spat orange tongues, licking the soot-darkened iron. The room smelled of pine resin wool and the faint metallic tang of old weapons oil, remnants of another life. In a chair near the stove sat an old man. His name was Samuel Ward, though in town most simply called him the veteran. For years he had grown accustomed to being that, and nothing more a relic in heavy boots, a man who walked alone. His beard had long since turned silver, his face mapped by creases carved deep by war wind and regret. He held a mug between his hands, chipped enamel half filled with tea that had gone cold without him noticing. His gaze rested on the fire, yet his eyes did not follow the flames. They were seeing something else. A memory pulled up from trenches of time. On the rug by the stove lay a German shepherd, massive shoulders rising and falling in slow rhythm. Ranger, once a military working dog, now bore the weight of age. His muzzle was frosted, not with snow, but with years, and his gait had stiffened with the quiet ache of old battles. Yet his eyes, amber and sharp, still burned with alertness. Wherever Samuel went, Ranger was there, a shadow made of muscle and loyalty. The storm pressed against the cabin walls like a living creature. The window panes rattled seams, whined snow hissed where the wind tried to force its way in. Samuel leaned back, listening. He had spent enough winters here to know the language of storms when they were simply blowing themselves out and when they meant to break a man. Tonight was the latter. He sighed, lifted the mug, and swallowed the last of the lukewarm tea. The taste was bitter. Maybe the tea had steeped too long, or maybe bitterness clung to him in everything he touched. He set the mug down, reached for the log basket, and tossed another length of spruce into the stove. Sparks flared, catching on the blackened interior before settling into a deeper glow. "Another long night, eh, boy?" His voice was low, roughened by years of disuse. Ranger raised his head, ears flicking, as though acknowledging the words. The old dog yawned, then settled his chin back on his paws. For a moment it was enough, the fire, the silence, the companionship of a creature that asked for nothing but presence. Samuel thought of the town below the ridge. Willow Bend population small enough that every face had a story, and every story had a shadow. They knew him there, though, not really. Men nodded without warmth. Women whispered, children were warned, don't go near the old soldier's cabin. He had stopped minding long ago. Solitude was safer than pity. The wind rose, shrieking around the eaves, and he closed his eyes. Against his will, the sound twisted into another memory. Not wind, but artillery. The long wail before impact. He saw flashes, dirt, exploding men, diving men, not getting up again. He heard his own voice, then younger shouting orders, calling names that no longer had owners. His hand clenched around the chair arm until the wood groaned. He opened his eyes, exhaled, and forced the memory back into its cage. And that was when Ranger stirred. The dog's ears shot up his head, snapping toward the door. His body moments ago heavy with drowsy calm, coiled tight as a spring. A low growl vibrated in his chest, not loud, but deep. The kind of sound that carried weight even in silence. Samuel frowned. "What is it? Ranger?" Rose's stiff joints, forgotten tail, stiff gaze locked on the door. His nose flared, drawing in scents the storm tried to bury. Then sharp and sudden came the sound. Scrape. A pause. Scrape. 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 It was unmistakable claws against wood. Not the hesitant scratching of a branch blown loose, but deliberate, insistent, as though something alive was pleading entry. Samuel pushed himself up, heart ticking faster than he liked. He crossed the room in a few strides, Ranger pressed close at his side, hackles raised. The old man's hand hovered over the latch. Years of soldiering whispered caution. He hesitated, listening. The sound came again. 3 quick rakes, then stillness, then one more longer dragging. He pulled the latch, opened the door a crack. At once the storm thrust itself inside a blast of snow and wind, icy knives slashing at the warm air. He squinted into the white blur. At first he saw nothing but chaos, flakes whirling like ash shadows bending in the gale. Then the blur shifted, and he caught sight of a shape on the porch. Low hunched, trembling, coated in frost. A dog. Samuel's breath caught. It wasn't Ranger, his companion was at his side, bristling. This was another German shepherd, younger, but battered, one leg bent at an angle that spoke of pain. The animal's fur clung in icy clumps, eyes wide with urgency. The stranger did not bark. Instead, it stepped forward, muzzle dipping, then lifted a paw and pressed it against the threshold as if drawing a line inside safe, outside danger. Ranger let out a sharp whine, something rare and strange in him. Samuel glanced down, saw recognition in his old dog's eyes, as if soldier to soldier had spoken. The storm screamed louder, driving snow into the cabin. Samuel hesitated, every instinct of caution warring with the echo of another life. He had seen that look before, on men dragging themselves back to camp, refusing to die until their message was delivered. "Damn it," he muttered. He swung the door wider, letting the night spill in. The shepherd staggered across the threshold, collapsed against his boots, and looked up with eyes that shone like lanterns lit inside amber glass. There was something in that gaze, urgent and raw, that told Samuel this was no ordinary stray. The old soldier knelt, his hands steady, even as his heart raced. "All right, boy," he whispered the words half to the newcomer, half to himself. "Show me what's out there." Behind him, the fire cracked, throwing sparks against iron. Ahead of him, the storm waited, vast and merciless. Between the two, in that fragile moment, Samuel Ward realized the night had chosen him. The door slammed shut behind them with a hollow clap, the kind that sounded final, even over the storm. Samuel Ward drew his collar high against the gale, his gloved hand gripping the leather leash. Ranger moved first, not with the sluggish steps of age, but with the surging momentum of memory. Tonight, the old dog was no house companion. He was a soldier again. Snow whipped across the porch, stinging Samuel's face, crusting into his beard. The lantern light barely reached beyond the steps, swallowed whole by the curtain of white. But Ranger seemed to know where to go. His nose pressed low, body angled into the wind. He strained forward, pulling Samuel off the ridge and down into the trees. Samuel let himself be guided. A man learns after too many campaigns that sometimes the wisest course is to follow the one who knows. Ranger's instincts had been trained in fire and field. Even with age stiffening his joints, even with the blizzard erasing every trail, Samuel trusted the dog more than he trusted his own eyes. They descended into the forest, boots and paws, sinking deep into powder. Each step was labor and negotiation with the storm. The pines loomed black branches bent under white weight, groaning like soldiers burdened past endurance. The beam of Samuel's flashlight caught on shards of ice, turning the world into a shifting mosaic of glass and shadow. Ranger halted suddenly, ears pricked. He pawed the ground, sniffed, then lunged toward a drift. Samuel followed, breath steaming, heart thudding with a rhythm older than reason. The snow was smooth, untouched, but Ranger dug, scraping furiously until he uncovered a faint groove, a line etched across the surface like a scar. A tire track. Half buried, almost erased. Samuel crouched, running his gloved fingers along the depression. It slanted downhill toward a darker hollow in the forest. He felt the old stir of recognition. This was not a random mark. It was the sign of a vehicle forced off course, dragged by momentum or violence into places it shouldn't go. The wind howled through the pines, but beneath it, Samuel heard something else. A memory. Dust, not snow, choking his throat. A convoy ambushed on a desert road. Tires, shredded metal, screaming men shouting. He saw the tracks in sand just as clearly as he saw them now in snow. He remembered the smell of burned rubber, the echo of gunfire the moment he realized half his squad had been pushed into a trap from which no one returned. The ache in his chest wasn't from the cold. It was from the ghosts. He rose, forcing the vision back. "Someone's out there," he murmured. Not to himself, but to the storm, to Ranger, to whatever force had brought this night upon him. Ranger tugged the leash, eager, determined. Samuel tightened his grip on the flashlight and let the dog lead on. They pushed deeper snow dragging at their legs, the storm lashing them like an enemy determined to turn them back. As they moved, Samuel's mind betrayed him with more memories. He saw faces in the swirls of white men who had followed him into fire, men who had not followed him back out. Each gust of wind carried a voice he knew calling his name, asking why he had survived when they had not. He clenched his jaw, forcing his focus forward. He had spent decades avoiding those ghosts, building walls of silence around himself. But tonight, the storm tore down those walls. Tonight, their voices came back not as accusation, but as reminder. "Do not fail again," Ranger barked once, sharp, pulling him out of the past. The dog had stopped at a cluster of trees circling something half buried in snow. Samuel hurried closer, sweeping the light. A fragment of glass winked up at him, emerald green against white. A shard of a taillight. He brushed more snow aside, uncovering twisted plastic, a smear of dark oil frozen into ice. His stomach tightened. Vehicle wreckage. Fresh. The storm screamed overhead, but Samuel no longer heard only weather. He heard the drum of urgency. Somewhere beyond these trees, someone was waiting. He pressed a hand to Ranger's shoulder. The dog was trembling not with fear, but with the urgency of his find. Samuel felt it too, a current running from the dog's body into his own bones. "All right," he muttered, voice low but steady. "Lead me, partner. Let's finish this." Ranger moved again, nose to the ground, tracing the invisible thread of scent and memory. Samuel followed each step deeper into the forest, each step heavier with the weight of recognition. He had walked like this before, following tracks, hunting survivors, clinging to the hope that someone was still alive. Most times hope had betrayed him, but not tonight. He could feel it like a pulse beneath the snow. Life. They crossed a narrow gully, the snow waist-deep. Samuel staggered, nearly losing his balance, but Ranger pulled against the leash, steadying him. The dog paused, looked back, eyes burning amber through the dark. And for a moment Samuel saw not just a dog, but a comrade. He nodded, breath ragged. "Still got fight in you," he whispered. "So do I." The wind shifted, carrying with it a faint sound. Samuel froze, straining his ears. At first he thought it was nothing, just branches creaking, snow collapsing from a pine. But then it came again, faint, muffled, but human, a cry. It was swallowed almost instantly by the storm, but it was enough. Samuel felt his chest tighten, his pulse surge. The old instincts returned, sharpened by urgency. Someone was alive out there. Someone who didn't have the strength to cry twice. He raised his flashlight, sweeping the beam ahead. Between the trees he caught the faint gleam of metal, half-buried, bent at an unnatural angle. A vehicle. Ranger lunged toward it, barking once the sound carried off by the gale. Samuel followed, stumbling, forcing his way through drifts until the shape became clear. A car overturned, its frame crushed against rocks, windows, shattered snow creeping into every crevice. The beam caught movement inside, a hand weak pressing against cracked glass, then falling still. Samuel's heart clenched. A man's hand, and somewhere within he sensed another presence, fragile, silent, but there. He dropped to his knees beside the wreck, pressing the flashlight against the window. His reflection stared back at him, lined, bearded eyes wide with both fear and determination. He placed his palm against the glass. "Hold on," he said, his voice firm, carrying more command than comfort. "We're here. You're not alone." Ranger stood beside him, tail-stiff ears forward, gaze locked on the dark interior. Snow swirled around them, but in that circle of light and breath, time slowed. For the first time in years, Samuel Ward felt the weight of purpose settle on his shoulders. Not the burden of ghosts, not the shadow of regret. Purpose. The storm raged, the past whispered, but the present demanded. The beam of Samuel's flashlight carved trembling shapes through the storm. Snowflakes darted like sparks across the light, hiding as much as they revealed. But the shadow of the vehicle was there, hunched against the slope, as though the mountain itself had tried to swallow it. He pushed forward, Ranger tugging at the leash, until the wreck loomed before them. A sedan dark blue beneath its crust of ice nose buried against Boulder's roof, crumpled wheels still spinning weakly as the storm shoved them. The back end jutted upward, as if the car had tried to leap the hill and failed. Samuel drew closer, boots crunching glass, hidden beneath snow. The smell reached him first, faint gasoline-sharp oil, the sterile tang of antifreeze already freezing in the cold. He swept the light over the windows. Most were shattered spiderwebs of cracks glistening like veins of crystal. Inside, movement. His heart stuttered. He pressed the light closer, angling past shards and frost. A young man sat trapped in the driver's seat. His forehead was smeared with blood dark against the pallor of his skin. Both hands pressed desperately against the passenger beside him. Samuel's stomach clenched when the light fell on her. A young woman, head tilted at an unnatural angle, hair tangled across her face, her body slack against the seatbelt. The curve of her stomach was unmistakable beneath the winter coat. Pregnant. The man's eyes flickered at the light wide wild. He mouthed something Samuel couldn't hear through the howl of wind and glass. His free hand pounded once weakly against the window, then dropped as though even that effort had drained him. Ranger growled low, pacing around, the wreck ears swiveling, searching for an opening. Snow swirled thick, clinging to his back, but he moved with focus, snout pressing against seams where glass had shattered. Samuel stepped closer, kneeling against the passenger side. His knees sank into icy powder, soaking through fabric. He pressed his hand against the glass, catching the man's frantic gaze. "You're alive, Samuel," said voice low, firm, hoping some tone of command might pierce the storm's muffling wall. "Hold on. We'll get you out." The man shook his head violently, lips forming shapes. Samuel read them in pieces. "Her, please, help her." The old soldier swallowed hard. He angled the flashlight across her body. The seatbelt dug into her abdomen, taut from the impact. Her chest rose shallowly once, then again faint as a whisper. Alive, but fading. For a moment the storm roared louder, carrying Samuel backward into memory. A Humvee overturned in sand. Men screaming inside one, pinned one, silent. Samuel clawing at twisted steel with bare hands, while rounds cracked in the distance. His sergeant shouting, "Leave them no time." Samuel refusing. The heat, the smoke, the sickening weight of failure, when one voice stopped crying for help. He slammed the memory shut, returning to the now. He would not let that story repeat. "Stay with me," he barked the order, cutting through the wind. The man flinched but met his eyes, something steadier flickering in his panic. Samuel glanced at Ranger. The dog stood braced against the gale, amber eyes locked on him, waiting. Samuel nodded once. "Find the way in." Ranger circled the vehicle paws, digging nose pressed close. He halted at the rear door where snow had piled, but not sealed completely. He pawed furiously, sending flurries spinning, revealing a seam. He barked once sharp, then looked back. Samuel dropped his pack, fumbling for the rescue hammer he always carried. Old habits die hard. Years of solitude hadn't stripped him of the instinct to be prepared. He crawled to the rear window, Ranger pressing at his side. Easy, he muttered more to the people inside than to himself. He braced, swung. The hammer's point struck glass. A web of cracks splintered outward, glittering. He swung again, harder. The pane gave with a sharp shatter, collapsing inward. Cold air burst into the cabin. The man inside gasped, turning his head toward the opening. Samuel shoved snow away, widened the gap with the hammer until jagged edges hung like teeth. "Don't move," he commanded. "I'll get you." Ranger leapt up, squeezing halfway through the opening, sniffing frantically, tail stiff. He pressed his muzzle against the woman's shoulder, whining softly, then pulled back as if to tell Samuel, "She's here. She's alive." Samuel pushed through. The interior was a chaos of broken glass, twisted plastic, the metallic bite of blood in the air. His flashlight beam jittered over the man's face, young, maybe 30 eyes bloodshot with fear. His hands trembled where they held his wife. Sir Samuel said firmly, soldier to soldier, though this man had likely never worn a uniform. "Look at me. You keep breathing. You keep her breathing. We're not losing anyone tonight." The man's lips moved again. She's not waking up. She will, Samuel shot back. But only if you listen, understand? A shaky nod. Samuel angled the light toward the woman. Her face was pale lashes rimmed with frost. A trickle of blood traced from her temple. Her coat strained against the seatbelt. Samuel's stomach knotted. He had no training for childbirth, but he knew enough about trauma. She needed warmth air, and above all, hope. "Ranger," he murmured. The old dog pressed in closer chest, wedging through the broken window tail, thrashing against snow. He lowered his head, licking gently at the woman's gloved hand. When she didn't stir, he whined low and persistent. The man's eyes filled shoulders, shaking. He whispered, "Please." Samuel placed a steady hand on his arm. "We're getting her out. Both of you. But I need you to fight, son. No panic. Just fight." He reached across, fingers working at the seatbelt buckle. It was jammed, twisted by the crash. He tugged, cursed under his breath, tugged again. No give. He pulled the rescue knife from his belt, flicked the blade, and sawed through the strap in one long, ragged stroke. The fabric snapped free. The woman slumped forward into Samuel's arms. For a heartbeat, he froze, feeling her weight. Light, far too light. He pressed 2 fingers to her neck. A pulse, faint, unsteady, but there. Relief washed through him, cold and fierce. "Alive," he muttered. "We've got her." The man's chest heaved a sob, breaking free. Samuel shifted, guiding her gently through the shattered window, where Ranger backed away to make space. Snow swirled, stinging her face, but Samuel shielded her with his body, lowering her into the drift. "Stay with her," he ordered Ranger. The dog immediately curled against her side, a living barrier against the wind. Samuel crawled back into the car. The young man sagged, head rolling. His leg was pinned against the console, twisted at an ugly angle. Blood soaked his pant leg. "Listen to me," Samuel said, grabbing his shoulder, shaking him. "What's your name, Daniel?" came the weak reply. "All right, Daniel. You've got one job. Keep your eyes on me. Not the pain, not the storm, me. Understood?" Daniel blinked hard, then nodded. Samuel wedged the knife beneath the debris, pressing his leg, prying, grunting. His shoulders ached, breath coming in white bursts. At last the panel shifted enough. On 3, he said, 1, 2, 3. Daniel groaned, wrenching his leg free, collapsing sideways into Samuel's grip. His face went white, lips trembling. Samuel hauled him toward the opening. Ranger barked encouragement outside, tail thudding snow. With one last shove, Samuel dragged Daniel through, tumbling them both into the drifts. For a moment they lay gasping snow, filling collars, breath stolen by the cold. Then Samuel pushed up, dragging Daniel to his knees. There he rasped, pointing toward the woman. Ranger stood over her chest, rising eyes blazing in the flashlight beam. Daniel crawled, stumbling through snow until he collapsed beside her. His hands fumbled for hers, clutching desperately. She did not stir, but her chest still rose. He buried his face against her coat, sobbing. Samuel crouched nearby, chest heaving, hand resting on Ranger's back. The dog leaned into him, panting, sides heaving but steady. Above them, the storm screamed, uncaring. But within that circle of breath and warmth, 3 lives clung to one another, refusing to let the night win. Samuel looked from the man to the woman to the dog. His heart pounded not just from exertion, but from something older. For the first time in decades, he felt the flicker of redemption. He had not been in time before. But tonight, he was. Snow hissed through the broken window, swirling into the hollow cabin of the car, like smoke filling a sinking ship. Samuel's shoulders burned from the strain of dragging Daniel free moments earlier, but there was no room for rest. The woman's faint breathing had already slowed once. The husband clutched her hand, whispering pleas into the storm, his voice trembling with despair. "Listen to me, son." Samuel's voice cut through the gale, not gentle but sharp, forged by years of command. He leaned close to Daniel, gripping his coat collar so the man would look at him, not at the lifeless face beside him. "She needs you. You hear me? Not just me, not just the dog. She needs you to hold on. You're her anchor." Daniel's bloodshot eyes lifted wild and unfocused. "She's slipping," he rasped. She's not waking." Samuel shook him once, not cruelly but firmly the way he had steadied panicked recruits years ago. "Then you hold tighter. You talk to her like she's listening because she damn well might be. You don't stop. You don't quit. That's an order." The words rang harshly in the frozen night, but they struck their mark. Daniel flinched, then gritted his teeth, nodding his jaw, trembling. He bent again toward his wife, voice breaking, but louder now, determined. "Anna, stay with me. You can't leave me. You hear? You promised me we'd see your mom together. You promised." Samuel crouched back, breath fogging, listening to the words tumble out, desperate, raw, but steadying. In the glow of the flashlight, Anna's lashes fluttered. Barely, but enough. A spark. Samuel exhaled, pressing one palm hard against the ice-cold metal, as though trying to steady himself against the weight of another memory. Afghanistan, night raid gone wrong. An APC hit by an IED overturned in a ditch. He had crawled in through fire and smoke, found Corporal Mitchell pinned under a panel. Mitchell's voice had cracked the same way, half sob, half plea. "Don't let me go, Sarge," Samuel had promised. He had held Mitchell's gaze until the younger man's eyes glassed over words, fading into silence. Samuel had kept the promise only in the smallest, cruelest way. He hadn't let go until there was nothing left to hold. His fist clenched. He would not fail this time. "Ranger," he barked. The German Shepherd was already moving, circling the wreck with an intensity that belied his years. He nosed at the snow, pawed furiously at drifted mounds, digging out shards of metal that blocked access. He shoved his shoulder against a dangling door, teeth bared in a silent snarl of effort. Samuel crawled back into the car flashlight beam, skittering across jagged edges. "We need space. Air. She's suffocating in here." Daniel lifted his head. "What do I talk to her?" Samuel snapped. "Keep her in this world. That's your fight." Daniel obeyed. His voice shook, but he pressed his forehead to hers, whispering fiercely, telling her about the baby, about the hospital crib they had picked, about the Christmas tree, still waiting at home. Anna's lips trembled. A faint sound, half breath, half moan, slipped from her throat. "She's with us," Samuel growled. "Don't you dare stop." He braced the rescue hammer again, smashing at the twisted panel by her side. Metal screamed, sparks flicking as his blows landed. He wedged his shoulders in, prying the frame outward. Ranger barked once outside, claws scrabbling against steel. He had found another grip point, tugging at a piece of plastic trim with his teeth, tearing it away to widen the gap. Snow poured in, chilling their hands, but it was space for breath. Anna gasped, suddenly, chest heaving. Her eyes fluttered. Daniel sobbed, clutching her tighter. "That's it, Anna. Breathe. Please breathe." Samuel glanced at them, heart thundering, then forced himself to keep his focus. He had learned too many times that relief too early was a trap. The fight wasn't over. "You're going to help me move her," he ordered. "When I say you lift." "Carefully. We'll get her clear." Daniel nodded, teeth clenched. Samuel shoved at the panel again. Muscles screamed old injuries flaring like hot wires along his back. He gritted his teeth, muttering under his breath, not to Daniel, not even to Anna, but to the ghosts circling him. "I didn't save you then," he whispered hoarsely. "But I'll save them now. You hear me, I will." Ranger whined low, as if echoing his vow. With one final heave, the panel bent outward enough to create an escape. Cold air surged in, rushing like a tide into lungs starved of space. Samuel dropped the hammer, breath ragged. Now Daniel shifted, cradling Anna's head as Samuel braced her legs. Together they maneuvered her limp body toward the gap. Ranger backed away just far enough to clear space, then pressed close again, tail-stiff eyes burning. Snow caught her face as they eased her out. She shuddered, eyelids twitching. Daniel pressed frantic kisses against her hair, murmuring words too fast to catch. Samuel lowered her to the drift, steadying her head on his coat. He pressed fingers against her neck. Still weak, but steadier than before. "She's holding," he said, rough but certain. Daniel broke down, forehead pressed to her stomach. "Thank God. Thank God." Ranger sat close, body forming a barrier against the storm. His nose pressed against Anna's belly, a low rumble vibrating in his chest, as if promising protection, not just for her, but for the life she carried. Samuel leaned back on his heels, chest heaving. The cold cut like knives, but heat pulsed through his veins, heat that came not from fire, but from resolve. He looked at Daniel, saw the man's trembling hands, the blood on his face, the raw panic still gnawing at his edges. "You've got more in you," Samuel said, voice quieter now, but no less firm. "More than you think. You don't get to collapse. You stand because you can't. That's what strength is." Daniel swallowed hard, nodding through tears. I'll try." "Not try," Samuel corrected, eyes blazing. "Do." For a moment, the storm faded. The past receded, and all that existed was this fragile circle. An old soldier, an old dog, a young man and a woman, hovering between silence and survival. The night had called, and they had answered. But Samuel knew this was only the beginning. The wreck groaned like a dying creature, metal shifting under the weight of snow pressing down from the slope. Samuel knew the car wouldn't hold much longer. Every creak was a warning. They had minutes, not hours, before the storm buried it, or gravity finished what momentum had begun. He set his jaw, glancing at Daniel, who knelt in the snow, clutching his wife's limp hand. The young man's face was pale beneath streaks of blood, eyes wide with a helplessness Samuel remembered too well. He had seen that look on boys in uniform who had never learned that sometimes survival meant clawing against the impossible. "Listen to me," Samuel said, voice cutting clean through the wind. "We can't stay here. We move her now. Both of you leave this car behind, or it will take you with it." Daniel blinked, torn between panic and disbelief. She can't walk." Then we carry her." Samuel's tone allowed no argument. "I've dragged men twice your size through worse. You'll do it, because she needs you to." Ranger barked once, sharp and commanding, as if underlining Samuel's words. The dog's tail lashed in the storm, his body angled toward the woods beyond. He already understood what needed to happen: movement, distance, survival. Samuel shoved his pack into the snow, yanking it open with hands that had done this dance too many times before. He pulled free a coil of rope, frayed but strong, and a wool blanket folded at the bottom. Here he muttered, spreading the blanket on the snow beside Anna. The cold bit instantly into the fabric, but it didn't matter. He looped the rope through carabiners, knotting quickly, his fingers moving with the memory of nights building stretchers in mud and sand. His hands shook not from cold, but from the ghosts pressing close. Another night. Another rescue. Sand, not snow. A stretcher cobbled from poles and canvas. A boy no older than 20 moaning softly as Samuel tied him down. They had carried him for hours through enemy fire, only for the medics to whisper too late. Samuel had sat in the dark afterward, rope burns in his palms, staring at his hands, and wondering why strength hadn't been enough. He shook the vision away, tugging the knot hard until it bit deep. Not this time. Not tonight. Help me, he ordered. Daniel moved clumsily, but obeyed, his hands trembling as he slid beneath his wife's shoulders. Samuel took her legs, guiding her limp weight onto the blanket. Together they shifted her carefully, inch by inch, until she lay centered on the makeshift sled. Snowflakes clung to her lashes, her lips pale as wax. But when Samuel pressed his fingers to her neck, he found the fragile flutter of life still there. "Good girl," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "You're not leaving yet." Daniel wiped his face with the back of his hand, streaking blood and tears. "What now?" "Now," Samuel said, hoisting the rope across his chest. "We haul her out of this hole before the mountain swallows her." Ranger pressed close, nose nudging Samuel's hand, as if volunteering himself. The old soldier glanced down at him, and for a heartbeat the fire in the dog's eyes was enough to steady his own. "You'll take point," Samuel said softly. "Clear the way." The dog barked once, low and certain, and turned toward the path they had carved through the drifts earlier. Samuel planted his boots, leaned back against the rope, and heaved. The sled jerked forward, scraping against ice, the woman's body bouncing gently under layers of blanket. Daniel stumbled to her side, one hand steadying her, the other clutching the sled's edge. "Don't stop talking to her," Samuel barked. Daniel blinked, breath ragged. "What?" "Talk to her," Samuel's voice cracked like a whip. "Keep her tethered to this world. Don't you dare let silence have her." Daniel bent his words, tumbling out, ragged, frantic, but constant. "Anna, it's me. I'm here. You're safe. We'll see your mom tomorrow. You'll laugh about how clumsy I was on the road. You'll tell me I never should have driven in this weather. Just stay." The sled lurched forward again, pulled by Samuel's stubborn weight and Ranger's relentless push through the storm. The wind howled, but beneath it Samuel caught fragments of Daniel's voice, each syllable a lifeline stretched across the dark. The climb was brutal. Snow clung to Samuel's legs like shackles, each step an argument against gravity. His breath tore from him in sharp bursts, pain flaring along his back and ribs. His vision swam, edges blackening, but he refused to loosen his grip. "You don't get to fail," he muttered between clenched teeth. "Not this time. Not again." Faces flickered before him. Mitchell, Alvarez, Kane. Men who had fallen while he lived. Men whose voices haunted the quiet hours. He saw them lying in sand and smoke, their eyes fixed on him in that final moment. And for years he had answered their gaze with silence, because he had no answer. But now, pulling this fragile woman through snow and storm, he felt them again, not as accusers, but as witnesses. As if they leaned close to see if he would finally do what he could not before. The sled broke free of the hollow, sliding onto the ridge with a crunch of snow. Samuel staggered, nearly dropping, but Ranger pressed against his side, steadying him with a shoulder. "Easy," Samuel rasped. He glanced back. Anna's chest still rose shallow, but steady. Daniel clung to her hand, murmuring hoarsely, tears frozen against his face. They had made it out. The storm shrieked around them, flinging ice like shrapnel. Samuel sank to one knee, pressing a trembling hand against the sled, against the blanket that sheltered life within. His vision blurred, not from wind, not from snow, but from the sting of release. "You're safe now," he whispered. "Safe." Daniel looked up, face twisted with desperate gratitude. "You saved her." "You—" Samuel shook his head, cutting him off. His gaze had gone distant, locked on something far older. "No," he said softly. "This time, I didn't lose her." Ranger pressed close, muzzle nudging Samuel's arm, amber eyes steady. The old soldier reached down, fingers tangling in the dog's fur. For the first time in decades, the knot in his chest loosened. He had pulled them into the light. And for once, it was enough. The ridge above the crash site groaned under the storm's weight. Wind clawed at the treetops, tearing snow loose and hurling it sideways like knives. The mountain did not care that 3 human lives clung to its flank. It wanted to bury to silence. Samuel Ward knelt in the drift chest, heaving from the haul. His hands, scarred and cracked, fumbled open the battered green kit he had carried for decades. The sled with the young woman lay before him, her body limp beneath the blanket, her breaths shallow, whispers that threatened to stop at any second. Daniel crouched close, one hand clutching hers, his other bracing against the snow, as though to keep from collapsing entirely. His eyes were red-rimmed, wild, still balanced on the edge between hope and despair. Ranger, the old canine, lowered himself across the woman's side, broad body forming a shield against the wind. Snow clung to his fur, but he held position without flinching. Head lifted, amber gaze cutting into the storm. His chest rose steady, a metronome of resolve, as though daring the blizzard to extinguish her flame. Samuel pulled gauze tape and a battered flask from the kit. He worked by instinct, hands moving faster than thought. He checked her airway, tilted her head, brushed snow and blood from her lips. A faint gasp shivered out. He leaned close, ear hovering over her mouth. Still alive. "Good girl," he whispered. "Stay with me." Daniel's voice cracked beside him. She's barely breathing. I don't know what to do." Samuel didn't look up. He pressed gauze against the cut on her temple, wrapping it quick, tight, efficient. "You know what you do? You hold her hand. You talk to her. You remind her she's not alone." I've been talking. She's not answering." Samuel's eyes flashed to him hard and unyielding. "Doesn't matter. She hears you. Even if she doesn't answer, she hears. That's how survival works. You hold them here with your voice until their body catches up." Daniel blinked, swallowed, then nodded. He bent low, whispering fiercely against her ear. "Anna, you're strong. You always were stronger than me. You don't get to give up now. Our baby's waiting for you. Your mom's waiting. Please just breathe." His voice broke, but he kept going, word after word, tumbling out like stones building a wall against the dark. Samuel shifted to Daniel's leg, slicing away soaked fabric to reveal the swelling beneath. Blood seeped sluggishly from a deep gash. Samuel hissed. "You're bleeding more than you think, but it's not the worst I've seen. You'll walk out of this if you listen." Daniel's laugh came bitter and thin. "Walk out! I can barely sit upright. You'll walk!" Samuel snapped, binding the wound with gauze, pulling the bandage taut until Daniel flinched. "Because she needs you to. Pain is nothing. I've marched men through worse, and you're no different." Daniel clenched his jaw, nodding through tears. Ranger stirred, shifting closer to Anna, pressing his flank tighter against her. His warmth seeped into her side, his steady breaths syncing with hers. Samuel saw it, the faint change in her chest rising with steadier rhythm. "Look at him," Samuel said, jerking his chin at the dog. Old as he is, joint-stiff lungs scarred by sand and smoke, yet he's holding that line like a soldier. You see that? That's loyalty. That's duty. And if he can stand it, so can you. Daniel looked at Ranger, eyes softening, then back at his wife. He straightened a little. Okay, I'll hold. I'll fight. Good, Samuel said, checking her pulse again. Stronger than before, though still fragile. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. She's with us, and she'll stay with us if we keep moving. He pulled another blanket from his pack, wrapping it around Anna, tucking it close. The storm tried to snatch the fabric away, but he pinned it with his weight, tying rope across her body to keep it in place. Daniel watched, trembling. You know what you're doing. I've done it before, Samuel muttered. Too many times. His hands stilled a moment memory, dragging him backward again. A medic tent reeking of blood and diesel. A boy no older than 19 on a cot, chest rising too faintly, Samuel kneeling beside him, whispering, You're not alone. Stay with me. The boy's lips parted, eyes unfocused, and then he was gone. Samuel had kept whispering long after because he didn't know how to stop, because silence meant accepting failure. He shook the memory off, gripping the rope harder. Not this time, he murmured. Daniel leaned close. What did you say? Nothing you need to carry, Samuel said firmly. Focus on her. Keep her voice tethered. Daniel nodded, bending low, whispering again. His words blurred with the wind, but Samuel heard the cadence, hope, wrapped in desperation. Ranger whined softly, ears twitching. He pressed his nose against Anna's hand, nudging until her fingers curled faintly in reflex. Daniel gasped. She moved. Did you see she? I saw, Samuel said. His voice cracked just slightly, but he steadied it. That's the fight coming back. Don't you stop talking now, not until she wakes. The storm howled, but in the fragile circle of their breath there was life. Samuel tied the last knot, then sat back, his body, aching lungs burning, but heart alight with a fire he thought long dead. He looked at Daniel, at Anna, at Ranger, holding the line. And for the first time in decades, Samuel Ward believed redemption was not only possible. It was happening in the fragile breaths of a young woman, in the trembling resolve of her husband, in the steadfast gaze of an old dog who refused to yield. The storm did not relent. If anything, it grew meaner as the night deepened, the wind turning vicious, tearing at coats and blankets as though trying to strip away every layer of protection. Snow gathered in drifts that swallowed boots and threatened to bury the path behind them. Samuel Ward leaned hard into the rope, across his chest, dragging the sled inch by inch through the frozen forest. The blanket-wrapped figure of Anna lay still beneath the lashings of rope, her breaths shallow but present. Daniel trudged beside her, one hand gripping the sled, the other clinging to hers, his face pale and streaked with blood. Ranger walked ahead, head low, body angled like the prow of a ship cutting through waves. Each step he took pressed a new trail through the drifts, paws sinking deep, then lifting with the stubborn rhythm of a creature who had marched through storms before and would not yield now. Samuel's lungs burned. Each breath tasted of ice and rust. His back screamed old injuries, sparking fire with every pull. Yet he did not loosen his grip. Every ounce of pain was a reminder, this is the work. This is the cost of refusing to let others die. Keep moving, he barked, his voice hoarse but commanding. Daniel staggered, nearly falling to his knees. I can't. Yes, you can, Samuel snapped, jerking the rope to keep the sled from slipping backward. You're a husband, a father-to-be. You don't get to stop. Daniel shook his head weakly, his steps faltering. I'm not. I'm not strong like you. I'll slow you down. Ranger stopped abruptly, turning back, his amber eyes fixed on Daniel, sharp and unwavering. Snow clung to his muzzle, his chest heaving, yet he held his stance with absolute steadiness. The look pierced Daniel like a blade. The young man froze under that gaze. For a moment time seemed to hang between them, man and dog, one faltering, the other refusing to allow it. Daniel's lips parted, a broken sound escaping. Then he gritted his teeth, lifted his head, and forced another step forward. "That's it," Samuel growled, watching. "You listen to him. He knows. He's telling you what I've told men in worse places. The only step that matters is the next one." The rope cut into Samuel's shoulders, but he leaned harder, dragging the sled forward. Each foot gained was a victory, though the forest gave nothing freely. Branches bowed under snow, cracking loudly, dropping heaps that nearly buried the trail. The wind shoved from every side, threatening to spin them back toward the wreck. Daniel stumbled again, catching himself on the sled. "I don't know if we'll make it." "You don't need to know," Samuel said. His words were clipped steel wrapped in frost. "You just need to walk. That's all survival is, walking until the ground turns into safety." Ranger pressed forward, weaving around a fallen branch, then glanced back, ears cocked, as if to check their progress. He barked once, short, impatient, and turned forward again. Daniel almost smiled through his exhaustion. "He won't let me quit." Samuel gave a grim nod. "Neither will I." They pressed deeper into the forest. The sled scraped, caught, lurched forward again. Samuel's vision blurred at the edges, but he locked his gaze on Ranger's tail, swaying ahead, the rhythm of loyalty dragging them toward town. In his mind, another march unfolded. Sand dunes, not snow. The same rope digging into his chest as he pulled a stretcher carrying Sergeant Alvarez's lungs rattling from shrapnel. Men had faltered around him, heat beating them down. But another ranger long gone, had been there too, pressing forward, tongue, lolling paws steady even when Samuel's knees nearly buckled. They had made it to the medics that day, though Alvarez hadn't survived the night. Samuel had sat with the dog afterward, whispering, "We got him out. That's what matters." The memory pressed close now, sharp as broken glass. But Samuel shoved it aside. This night would not end the same. Hours seemed to pass in minutes, or minutes in hours. Time lost meaning in the blizzard's roar. Samuel measured the journey only in breaths, in the crunch of boots, in Ranger's paw prints, marking a fragile path. Daniel faltered again, sagging against the sled. Samuel dropped beside him, grabbing his collar. "Look at her," he ordered. Daniel lifted his head. Anna's face lay pale against the blanket lashes rimmed with frost. Her lips moved faintly, barely a whisper of life. "She's still here," Samuel said, his voice a growl of defiance. "As long as she breathes, you move. You owe her that." Daniel's eyes filled, but he nodded fiercely. "For her. For the baby." "That's right." Samuel shoved him upright. "Now walk." Ranger barked again, sharp and commanding, before pushing forward once more. Step by step they dragged the sled through the storm. The forest thinned slightly, the wind sharper where the trees broke. Samuel caught glimpses of the valley below, dark shapes shifting in white-out haze. Somewhere out there lay the town lights hidden by distance and snow. Daniel gasped, his voice breaking. "How much farther?" "Far enough to hurt," Samuel said, tugging the rope, but not far enough to quit. Ranger forged on, unrelenting. His paws bled faintly where ice had split the pads, leaving crimson smudges on the snow. Samuel saw it, chest twisting, but the dog never faltered. He moved like a creature who had been bred and trained to serve until the last heartbeat. Daniel saw it too. His expression shifted exhaustion tempered by awe. He's bleeding. Doesn't matter to him, Samuel said, voice hoarse. He'd rather die moving forward than lie down safe. That's what soldiers do. That's what fathers do. Learn from him. Daniel's throat worked. He straightened, leaning into the sled, pushing with new strength. Anna stirred faintly beneath the blankets, a muffled moan escaping. Daniel nearly collapsed with relief. She's still with us. Samuel's chest swelled. Then we keep her there. Don't stop now. The storm raged, but inside their circle, something stronger pulsed resolve, loyalty, the refusal to let go. Samuel dragged, Daniel pushed Ranger Elide, and Anna breathed. That was enough. Hours later, or maybe only one, they broke through another line of trees. The slope leveled slightly. In the distance, faint through the swirling white, Samuel glimpsed a glow. A light. The town. His chest clenched with fierce relief, but he didn't slow. If anything, he pulled harder, his voice breaking into the night, almost there. Keep walking. Daniel sobbed, stumbling but refusing to fall. I see it! I see it! Ranger barked once, sharp and triumphant, before pressing forward with renewed strength. The sled scraped across hard-packed snow, leaving a dark trail behind them. Each step carried them closer to that fragile glow, closer to warmth, to safety, to life. Samuel's body screamed, his ghosts pressed tight around him, but he ignored them all. Tonight was not about him. Tonight was about pulling a family through the storm, proving to himself that he could still save, not just survive. And as the first true flicker of town lights pierced the gale, Samuel Ward whispered hoarsely, "We're bringing you home." The glow of town lights flickered faintly in the distance, small, fragile, and almost impossible to believe. Samuel Ward fixed his eyes on that glimmer, afraid that if he looked away, it might vanish like a mirage. The storm shrieked louder, as if it had sensed their hope and meant to smother it. The rope across Samuel's chest burned into his shoulders. Every muscle trembled, begging for rest. Daniel stumbled beside him, limping, his face twisted with pain. The sled scraped behind them, carrying Anna still swaddled in blankets, her breaths faint but present. And at their front, Ranger led. The old German shepherd pressed into the storm like a ship's prow against furious seas. His coat once thick and gleaming, now matted with snow. His muzzle dusted white, not only from age, but from the night's battle. His paws bled where ice had split the pads, but he did not falter. Ranger lowered his head, teeth clamped around the rope Samuel had tied to the sled. Each pull strained his body, but he heaved anyway, muscles bunching, shoulders trembling. He barked once, sharp and defiant, before lunging forward again, dragging them another step toward the town. Samuel felt it, the surge of energy flowing from the dog into his own bones. He had marched with men who broke under less. He had seen soldiers collapse when the horizon was in sight. But Ranger, old as he was, carried himself with the unyielding certainty of a warrior who had decided this battle would be won, no matter the cost. "Look at him," Samuel rasped to Daniel. His voice cracked, rough with exhaustion. "He's older than me in soldier's years. He's torn, bleeding, but he's still pulling. You see that? That's what it means to finish." Daniel lifted his head, eyes glassy, locking on Ranger's straining form. For a moment, awe replaced despair. His lips parted. He won't stop." "Neither will we," Samuel growled. You match him step for step." Daniel gritted his teeth and stumbled forward, his hand tightening on the sled. The path grew crueler. Drifts rose higher, swallowing Ranger's legs to the chest. He clawed through them, snow spraying in furious bursts. He barked sharply each time he found ground beneath, signaling them to follow. When Samuel's knees buckled, Ranger glanced back, eyes flashing as though to say, "Up, forward, don't quit." Samuel obeyed. He always had. Another memory bled in. Desert heat, not snow. A firefight raging across dunes. Ranger, this same dog, younger, stronger, charging through gunfire to drag a wounded man by his vest. Samuel had shouted, cursed, begged him back, but the dog had pressed on instincts older than commands. The man had lived. That night, Samuel had whispered into Ranger's fur, "You're more soldier than any of us." The storm pulled him back. That same fire burned in the dog, now older, but not dimmed. Samuel clenched the rope tighter. "Come on, Daniel," he barked. "You've got a soldier showing you how it's done. Follow him." Daniel staggered, sweat freezing on his brow. His leg wound throbbed, but Ranger's persistence kept him upright. Every bark was like a drumbeat, every pull like a command. Move, survive, fight. Anna moaned softly on the sled. Her head shifted beneath the blanket. Daniel's breath hitched. "She's still here." "Then you keep her here," Samuel growled. "She needs to open her eyes in that town, not in the snow." The lights ahead flickered, sometimes gone behind sheets of white, sometimes reappearing like stars through cloud. Hope dangled always just out of reach. Ranger lunged forward again, dragging with a force that seemed impossible for his battered frame. His body shook, sides heaving, but he pressed on. Samuel watched him with a strange, fierce pride. The dog was burning through every last reserve of strength, but he was not surrendering. "See him," Samuel whispered hoarsely. "That's what will looks like. Not youth, not muscle. Will." Daniel nodded, jaw clenched, tears freezing on his cheeks. I'll match him. Good man." The path narrowed where fallen trees blocked the slope. Samuel's stomach clenched. They couldn't haul the sled over it. It would tip spill her. Ranger barked furiously, darting to the side, plunging into a thicket. His body vanished into the drifts, only his tail flashing before disappearing. Then his bark rang out again, sharp, urgent. "He's found a way," Samuel said. They followed, dragging the sled into the narrow cut Ranger had forced. Branches lashed their faces. Snow cascaded from above, but the dog cleared the trail, teeth snapping branches, shoulders, forcing gaps wider. Each obstacle fell to his stubborn will. Daniel gasped. He's carving the way for us." Samuel grunted. "That's what he's always done." The sled scraped through Anna, still cocooned. Samuel leaned harder, his lungs on fire. Ranger burst from the thicket ahead, barking again, summoning them through. Step by step they emerged, stumbling into a clearer path. The lights of the town glowed brighter now, no longer a mirage, but real, steady, promising warmth. But Ranger staggered. Samuel saw it, the falter in his gait, the shudder in his body. The old dog dropped to one knee in the snow, chest heaving. Samuel's heart lurched. "Ranger!" he shouted. The dog lifted his head, eyes blazing, still refusing to yield. With a snarl, he heaved himself upright, seizing the rope again, pulling forward. His body trembled, but his spirit roared. He barked once, sharp, fierce, before lunging ahead. Samuel's throat tightened. "You stubborn bastard," he whispered, pride and grief mingling. Daniel stared, awe flooding his face. He's still going. Then so are we, Samuel said, his voice shaking but resolute. They pressed forward together. An old soldier, a wounded man, a fading woman, and a dog who refused to surrender. Ranger dragged them the last yards, barking each time his paws found firm ground, blazing a path through the blizzard. Samuel and Daniel matched him step for step, every ounce of strength wrung from their bodies. And at last the storm broke, just enough for the town's lanterns to shine clear. The sound of distant bells reached them, voices shouting, shapes moving toward them through the snow. Ranger staggered again, collapsing into the drift, chest heaving. Samuel dropped beside him, hands burying in his fur. "You did it," he whispered fiercely. "You got them here. You finished." Ranger's amber eyes met his burning still before closing in weary triumph. And as rescuers reached them, as lights flared bright against the storm, Samuel Ward realized this night's second battle had been won not by him, not by Daniel, but by the old warrior at his side. The world had narrowed to the crunch of boots in snow, the scrape of the sled, and the ragged rhythm of breath. Samuel Ward's vision swam at the edges, every muscle trembling with exhaustion. Daniel stumbled beside him, dragging his injured leg like a dead weight, lips moving in broken whispers to his wife, bundled beneath the ropes. And then, through the blizzard's roar, a flicker appeared. At first, Samuel thought it a trick of the storm, a reflection in ice, a phantom light conjured by desperation. But the glow returned steady and golden, burning faint against the endless white. Not a mirage. A lantern. The town! Samuel rasped. His voice was raw, almost unbelieving. "There. Look!" Daniel lifted his head eyes, bloodshot, squinting into the storm. When he saw it, a choked sob broke from him. "I see it, Anna. We're almost there." The faint glow swelled as the storm shifted, revealing more, another lantern swinging, then two, then a line of them strung like beacons across the darkness. Human voices shouted, muffled by wind, but close enough now that they were real. Hope struck like fire through Samuel's veins. His legs screamed, his shoulders throbbed, but strength flared from somewhere deeper. He tightened the rope across his chest. Leaning forward, one last push, Ranger collapsed moments earlier, forced himself upright again. The old dog shook snow from his coat sides, heaving eyes blazing with determination. With a low, guttural bark, he seized the rope in his teeth and surged ahead, dragging the sled forward another yard. His body trembled, but his spirit roared louder than the storm. Daniel stared, awe spilling across his broken features. "He won't stop. Then neither do you," Samuel snapped. His voice carried a command that reached both man and beast alike. "You match him step for step. No one quits now." The light ahead bobbed closer shadows of people moving toward them through the gale. Samuel's heart hammered, but he kept his eyes fixed forward. He knew all too well how close they still hovered to the edge. Relief was dangerous if it came too soon. Daniel stumbled, nearly collapsing. Samuel grabbed his collar, hauling him upright. "Look at her!" he barked, pointing to Anna. Her chest still rose beneath the blanket, faint, but steady. "She's breathing. She's waiting for you to carry her home. You don't get to stop here." Daniel's eyes filled with tears, but he straightened, staggering into motion again. The wind shrieked, battering them sideways, snow slicing across their faces. The path ahead blurred, then cleared, then blurred again. Samuel clenched his jaw. "Follow Ranger. Trust him." The old dog carved forward paws, bleeding muzzle white with frost, but his movements were purposeful, certain. Each bark he loosed was a beacon in itself, answered faintly now, by the shouts of rescuers beyond. "They see us," Daniel gasped. "They're coming." Samuel shook his head. "We finish this. We bring her to them, not the other way around." He leaned into the rope, teeth gritted, dragging the sled with the last fire in his body. Daniel pressed his hands to the sled's frame, pushing, groaning with effort. Ranger pulled with his jaws clenched tight, the rope cutting into his gums, blood marking the snow. The lights grew brighter, voices louder. Shapes emerged, men with lanterns, coats pulled tight, their shouts clear now. "Over here, this way!" Samuel nearly collapsed with relief, but forced himself upright. "Not yet," he growled to himself. "Not until she's in their hands." The final stretch was the worst. Snow piled waist deep. The wind shrieking with rage as though determined to make this last 100 yards their grave. Samuel pulled. Daniel pushed, Ranger clawed. Each inch forward was a battle. Daniel gasped, tears freezing on his cheeks. "I can't." "Yes, you can," Samuel roared, voice echoing off the trees. "One more step. One more," Ranger barked fiercely, dragging harder, his whole body trembling with the effort. His eyes burned like coals in the dark, refusing to dim. The rescuers broke through the storm at last, lanterns blazing, faces etched with shock. "We've got them," someone shouted. Hands reached for the sled, for Daniel, for Anna. But Samuel refused to let go until the sled was lifted, until Anna's body was in other arms. Only then did he release the rope, falling to his knees in the snow. Daniel collapsed beside him, clutching his wife's hand, as rescuers pressed blankets over her, checking her pulse, calling orders. His sobs turned to laughter, wild and broken. "She's alive! She's alive!" Ranger staggered to Samuel's side, collapsing against his shoulder. The old soldier buried a hand in his fur, gripping tight. "You did it," he whispered fiercely. "You brought them home." The lanterns glowed around them, warm halos against the storm. Voices rose, calling for stretchers, for hot water, for the doctor. Samuel lifted his head, snow crusted in his beard, eyes burning. The light in the gale had guided them through. But it wasn't the town that had carried them here. It was the will of an old dog who refused to stop the stubborn faith of a husband and the last reserves of strength an old soldier had thought long gone. For the first time in years, Samuel Ward let himself breathe, not in relief, not in surrender, just in the quiet certainty that tonight he had not failed. The lanterns broke through the storm like a fleet of ships in a black sea. Golden light swung wildly, stabbing through sheets of snow, scattering shadows across the ridge. Shout rose above the wind. Human voices urgent, alive, drawing nearer with every heartbeat. "Here, over here," a man roared, his voice rough from cold. Samuel Ward staggered back a step as the rescuers surged forward. For hours it had been only the scrape of the sled, Daniel's hoarse pleas, and the blizzard's merciless howl. Now suddenly the air erupted with noise, with motion, with the heat of many bodies pushing against the cold. Figures knelt around Anna's stretcher lantern beams, flashing across her pale face. "She's got a pulse," one rescuer shouted, pressing fingers to her throat. "Weak but steady. Get her wrapped, head and neck supported. Easy." Another barked, his voice carrying the clipped precision of practice. Blankets unfolded thicker and drier than the ones Samuel had lashed around her hours ago. Rough hands worked quickly, tucking fabric against her body, strapping her onto the stretcher. The storm fought to tear it all away, but the rescuers moved like men who had battled blizzards before. Daniel lunged toward her, half crawling, half falling. "Anna." "I'm here. I'm right here." His voice cracked, desperation spilling raw. Two rescuers caught him, steadying his trembling body. "Easy, sir," one said firmly. "We'll take care of her. Let us work. I can't leave her. I won't leave her." "You won't," the rescuer promised. "We'll get you both out. But you need treatment too. Look at your leg. You can't stand." Daniel shook his head fiercely, but Samuel stepped closer, voice rough. "Listen to them, son. They know what they're doing. You've brought her this far. Let them carry her the rest." Daniel's eyes found his wide and broken, then slowly softened. He nodded, choking back a sob. "Don't let her slip away. She won't." Samuel said not as comfort, but as command. "Not tonight." Rescuers slid Anna onto the stretcher. Lanterns illuminated her face, pale as porcelain lashes rimmed with frost. For the first time since he had found her in the wreck, Samuel allowed himself to unclench his fists. Her survival was no longer his burden alone. Lift a rescuer barked. Strong arms raised her steady despite the storm. The stretcher rose into the night, cradling life like a fragile flame. Daniel cried out, reaching for her. Rescuers shifted him to his feet, slinging his arm across their shoulders. "We've got you. You'll ride with her." His hand flailed until it found hers. Fingers touched, clung even as both were carried forward. The sound that broke from him was half sob, half laugh, the sound of a man who had been staring into the grave, and now saw dawn. "Ambulance is waiting at the square," someone shouted through the gale. "Move now." The lantern-lit column surged forward, Anna borne at its center, Daniel stumbling beside her. The storm howled in protest snow, whipping harder, but the rescuers pressed on, shields of flesh and willpower around the fragile family. Samuel stood frozen, chest heaving, watching the lanterns recede. The rope slipped from his chest, falling slack into the snow. His body trembled not with cold now, but with the sudden weightlessness that came when duty shifted from his shoulders. It was over. His fight was over. Ranger pressed against his leg. The old dog's body quaked with exhaustion, paws bloodied muzzle white with frost, but his eyes tracked the retreating lanterns burning steady. Only when the glow dipped out of sight did he lower his head, leaning heavily against Samuel. Samuel dropped a hand to his fur fingers burrowing into the matted coat. "You finished it, partner," he whispered. His voice cracked, but he forced it steady. "You carried them home." Behind them, more villagers had gathered, lanterns clutched in mittened hands, faces etched with shock. Some Samuel recognized: the grocer, who had once turned away when he entered, the carpenter, who had muttered about the strange old vet on the ridge, the widow who had warned children not to wander near his cabin. Now their gazes held something else. Not suspicion, not disdain. Something closer to respect. He pulled them out. One man murmured. Through the storm whispered another. He and that dog. The words drifted through the wind, carried, but not meant for him. Samuel didn't answer. He had no need for acknowledgement, no desire for their approval. All he cared for had already been carried toward the glow of town lights. And yet when one man lifted his lantern slightly, almost like a salute, Samuel felt it. A shift. Small, fragile, but real. He turned away before it could linger. Recognition was a heavy thing. He had carried enough of it in war. Snow crunched as he adjusted his pack, tugged his coat tight. "Home," he muttered. Ranger stirred, lifting his head. His breath came ragged, but his tail flicked once as if in agreement. He fell into step beside Samuel as they began the slow trudge back toward the cabin. Behind them, the commotion continued. Voices rising, bells ringing as the ambulance doors slammed shut. The sound echoed like a final verdict across the valley. For the town, it was the sound of triumph. For Samuel, it was something quieter. A closing of one story, a promise kept, and the faint easing of a wound he had carried for too many winters. The storm swallowed their silhouettes as they vanished into the trees, man and dog walking side by side, leaving the blaze of lanterns behind. The storm swallowed them the moment the lanterns vanished from sight. Samuel Ward trudged forward into the dark, each step heavy, each breath dragging fire into his lungs. Ranger moved at his side, shoulders hunched, paws dragging. They no longer fought to keep pace with anyone. They simply walked. Snow whispered under their boots and paws. The only other sound was the distant toll of bells in town, muffled now, fading with every step away. Samuel did not look back. He didn't need to. The work was finished. His body ached in ways he had not felt in years. Muscles long unused for battle screamed with every movement. His hands cracked, and bleeding still twitched as though gripping rope. Yet the weight pressing on his chest, the old weight, the weight of failure and ghosts, was lighter. It was as if the storm itself had carried some of it away. Beside him, Ranger stumbled, then righted himself. Samuel slowed. "Easy, partner," he muttered. His voice was rough, but softer now, a voice he had once used with men who had given everything on the line. "We're almost there." The cabin lights appeared faintly between the trees, small, dim, but steady. Samuel felt a warmth that had nothing to do with fire. Home. They had brought others back to their home, and now they had their own waiting. They climbed the last ridge. Samuel's boots slipped twice, but Ranger pressed forward, muzzle low, guiding them, as if even in exhaustion he would not let Samuel falter. When at last the cabin's shape loomed out of the storm, Samuel exhaled deeply, the sound half a sigh, half a prayer. He pushed the door open. Warmth met them, faint but real, as the fire in the stove still glowed with embers. The storm howled outside, but within shadows wrapped them in familiar arms. Samuel dropped his pack, shoulders slumping with release. Ranger padded in, collapsing heavily on the rug by the stove. For a moment the old soldier simply stood there, leaning against the doorframe, staring at his companion. The dog's sides rose and fell in ragged rhythm, but his eyes cracked open, watching Samuel even through weariness. The amber glow in them had not faded. Samuel's throat tightened. He shut the door against the storm and crossed to the stove. His knees nearly buckled as he knelt, feeding logs into the fire, coaxing it back to life. Flames licked upward, casting warmth into the room, filling it with the crackle of life returning. He straightened slowly, joints aching. His eyes lingered on Ranger. "You stubborn old warrior," he whispered. "You gave them everything." The dog's tail thumped weakly against the rug once, twice. Samuel moved to the cupboard. His hands shook as he reached for the kettle, filling it from the jug, setting it on the stove. Steam soon hissed, curling into the air, carrying the scent of metal and heat. He pulled down 2 chipped mugs habit, though only one was truly meant for him. He had always poured a little for Ranger, a ritual that bridged silence. When the water boiled, he spooned in tea leaves, watching them swirl, darkening the liquid. He set one mug down by his chair and the other closer to the rug where Ranger lay. The dog's ears flicked, nose twitching at the familiar scent. Samuel took his seat with a groan, wrapping his hands around the mug. The heat seeped into his fingers, easing the ache. He closed his eyes briefly, breathing in the steam. For once, the silence in the cabin did not feel heavy. On the table lay a small tin. He reached for it, opening the lid to reveal biscuits hard dry, but sweet enough. He broke one in half, setting a piece beside Ranger. The dog lifted his head, sniffed, then took it, gently chewing slowly. Samuel smiled faintly, a rare thing on his weathered face. "You earned more than that tonight, but it'll do for now." The fire popped. The storm rattled against the windows. Inside, warmth pooled quiet and steady. Samuel sipped his tea, the bitterness grounding him. His eyes drifted toward the window, where only darkness pressed back. Somewhere beyond that blackness, Anna was in a bed wrapped in blankets, not lashed by rope, but folded by caring hands. Daniel sat beside her, his own wounds tended. Their child still lived, waiting to be born. And Samuel had a hand in that. He let out a long breath, one that seemed to empty something that had been trapped in his chest for decades. In his mind, he saw the faces of men he had lost, Mitchell, Alvarez, Kane. For years they had haunted him, their eyes accusing, their silence deafening. Tonight, when he closed his eyes, he saw them differently. Not angry, not abandoned. Watching. "You'd have been proud," he murmured into the steam. "We didn't lose them." Ranger shifted, pressing his muzzle against Samuel's boot. The old soldier reached down, fingers tangling in coarse fur. The dog's warmth against his skin anchored him, tethering him to the present rather than the past. They sat together, man and dog, as they had in countless nights before. But tonight was different. Tonight's silence was not emptiness. It was peace. The minutes passed, marked only by the hiss of the kettle, the crackle of firewood, the slow rhythm of breathing. Samuel finished his tea, setting the mug aside. He leaned back, eyes closing, body sinking deep into the chair. Ranger curled closer to the stove tail, flicking once before settling. His breaths slowed steady, sinking with Samuel's own. Samuel allowed the warmth to wrap him, the quiet, to settle over him like a blanket. He had no need for words, no need for recognition. The town would talk, perhaps even look at him differently now. But none of that mattered here. Here there was only the old soldier, the old dog, and the fragile peace of a night where lives had been pulled back from the edge. For the first time in years, Samuel Ward felt the weight of his past ease, not erased, but carried differently. Lighter, bearable. He whispered once, softly, almost to himself, "We made it home." Ranger's tail thumped against the rug, a quiet affirmation, before both drifted into the kind of rest earned only after battle. Winter loosened its grip slowly, as if reluctant to surrender. Weeks passed before the blizzards quieted, before the ridges wore less white, and the river ice cracked under the thaw. Samuel Ward's cabin still stood in solitude, smoke rising each morning from its chimney, but something in the valley had shifted. The town of Willow Bend carried on with its rhythm markets, opening bells, tolling children, shouting in the square, but in the spaces between, in the glances exchanged, in the words left unsaid, a quiet change had taken root. It began in the market. Samuel came down one morning with Ranger at his side, a basket strapped to his back. He moved through the crowd the way he always had, head low, eyes forward, expecting nothing more than the usual silence or sidelong stares. Ranger padded close tail, low amber eyes flicking toward every passerby with soldier's vigilance. At the grocer's stall, Samuel placed a bundle of firewood on the counter. He was about to speak when the man behind it looked up, and instead of the curt nod Samuel had grown used to, he spoke first. "Morning, Mr. Ward." Samuel paused. The words were plain, simple. Yet for years no one in Willow Bend had greeted him first. He studied the man's face for mockery, but found only sincerity awkward, perhaps, but real. "Morning," Samuel replied, voice gravelly. He lifted the sack of flour the grocer handed him the exchange, wordless after that. But as he turned, he caught Ranger's ears flicking, as if the dog had sensed the subtle easing in the air. A week later, another shift came. Samuel was passing the square when a small voice piped up. "Can I pet him?" He stopped. A boy of perhaps 7 stood by the fountain, mittens dangling from his hands, eyes wide with wonder fixed on Ranger. Behind him, his father stiffened, stepping forward. Samuel braced, expecting the man to drag the boy away as so many parents had done before. But instead the father's gaze flicked to Samuel, then down to Ranger, then back again. Slowly he nodded. "If it's all right with the gentleman," he said. Samuel blinked, caught off guard. Ranger stood patiently, tail giving a slow wag. Samuel inclined his head. "He won't harm him." The boy approached hesitantly, reaching out with both hands. Ranger lowered his head, pressing his muzzle gently into the small palms. The boy giggled, the sound bright against the gray day. His father watched in silence, his expression unreadable, but when Samuel glanced up, he saw no fear there, only quiet respect. The third change was at the diner. For years, Samuel had walked past its windows, catching the smell of coffee and bread, but never stepping inside. It wasn't that he wasn't welcome. No one had ever barred him. But the looks, the whispers, they had been enough to keep him away. One morning on his way back from the blacksmith's, he stopped. A new sign hung in his window, painted in bold, cheerful letters, "Dogs Welcome." Samuel stared at it for a long moment. Through the glass, he saw the waitress who had once refused to meet his eye. She caught sight of him now and gave a small nod. Not an invitation, not a plea, just acknowledgement. Ranger tilted his head as if asking a silent question. Samuel chuckled dryly. "We'll see, partner. Maybe another day." He moved on, but something in his chest felt warmer than the sun on his back. The last shift came on the bridge. The river had begun to thaw, cracking under spring's touch. Samuel crossed the wooden planks one afternoon, Ranger trotting at his heel. Ahead stood the bridge guard, a man who had always regarded him with suspicion, hand on his rifle, eyes narrowed. As Samuel approached, he prepared for the usual silence. Instead, the guard lifted his hand, palm out, fingers stiff. A salute. It was brief, awkward, but deliberate. Samuel slowed, nodding once in return. Ranger's ears flicked, as though noting the solemnity of the exchange. These changes were small, almost unspoken. But to Samuel, who had lived years in exile among his own neighbors, they were louder than any cheer, more enduring than any medal. He did not need parades. He did not need to be called hero. What mattered was this, that when people saw him now, they did not look away. Spring deepened. The storm's scars melted from the land, though the memory of that night lingered in every corner of the town. In whispers at the market, in stories told at the bar, the tale of the old soldier and his dog grew. Children repeated it with awe. Parents shared it in hushed tones, their voices a mixture of gratitude and humility. Samuel never joined those conversations. He remained on the edges, as he always had. But he noticed when doors no longer closed quite so quickly, when eyes met his with quiet recognition. He noticed when Ranger was no longer the object of fear, but of fascination, children pointing and whispering with wonder rather than dread. One evening, as the sun bled red over the ridges, Samuel walked with Ranger along the town's edge. The fields lay quiet grass, just beginning to show green beneath patches of snow. The air was cool, scented with thaw and earth. They walked without hurry, Ranger padding steady. Samuel's steps slower now, each one weighted with age, but lightened by something new. As they passed, townsfolk lifted their eyes. Some nodded, some offered small smiles. No one said the word hero, but they didn't need to. It was there in the way their gazes lingered, in the way they did not look away. Samuel stopped at the crest of a hill overlooking Willow Bend. The town glowed faintly, lanterns flickering to life, smoke curling from chimneys. Ranger sat beside him, ears pricked, eyes steady on the horizon. Samuel breathed deeply, the air filling his chest. For the first time in years, it did not feel like a burden. He reached down, resting a hand on Ranger's head. "They see us now," he murmured. "Not ghosts, not outcasts, just men who did their duty." Ranger's tail thumped once against the ground. Together, man and dog turned, continuing their walk along the town's edge. They did not need applause. They did not need titles. The quiet was enough. For in that silence lay something greater than glory, the simple weight of being seen. And for Samuel Ward and his old canine, that was all they had ever wanted.